So coming up next, we have a session that I am really excited for. We have Danni Washington and Leandra Taylor joining us. For this session, the title is "The Ocean Belongs to Everyone: How to Create Authentic Opportunities that Encourage Diversity, Inclusion, and Equal Access in Ocean Conservation." During the session, you'll hear from Danni and Leandra talk about why historically marginalized communities deserve a seat at the table in the world of marine conservation. And you'll also learn a little bit about how current youth leaders can actively work as allies to make sure everyone's voice is heard, and effective strategies on how we can support each other in this movement and in this moment. So I did just want to, I'll pass it right along to Danni and Leandra for them to introduce themselves. Y'all, take it away.
All right. Is everyone able to see me here? All right, I see you guys now. Awesome. So good afternoon, good evening to many of you. I am so excited to be here. My name is Danni Washington, and this session is important to me because we're going to be discussing our personal experiences as conservationists. I come from an ocean background, and my education is based in marine biology. But I met Leandra not too long ago, a couple years ago in Washington, D.C., when she was chosen as an NAAEE 30 under 30 honoree, and we hit it off immediately, and I just was so intrigued by her story. Although she's not directly connected to ocean conservation work, her work in the natural arena is what's most important, because no matter where you live on this planet, we are all connected to the ocean. And I think that we have a lot of parallel experiences that we wanted to share with you today because it's relevant to the times that we're living in. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Hey, Leandra. What's up?
Oh, hey.
Hey. So we've got a surprise for you. Leandra is also an artist, and so she will be doing some drawing while we're going through our session and kind of talking about different topics. So I hope you'll enjoy her beautiful artwork at the same time. All right, so I'm going to share my screen now. Let me head on over to my Keynote. Here we go. Hit play. Sweet. So there we are. Awesome. Are you guys able to see my screen? Leandra, are you able to see it? Can I get a thumbs up? Fantastic. All right, so like I said, my name is Danni, and now I want to give Leandra an opportunity to introduce herself formally.
Hi guys, my name is Leandra Taylor. I'm here with you live from Austin, Texas. Sorry, excuse my traffic, but I wanted to give you a little bit of background on myself and how I got started in conservation. I grew up as an Army brat in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and for me, nature was always what kept me grounded and feeling secure and able to be creative and explore myself and my Blackness outside. And I always felt like, I really resonated with Captain Planet. So I was like, in some way or another, I'm going to figure out how to save the planet. So I went to school at Baylor University and graduated in 2014 with my bachelor's in environmental science. And from there realized I hadn't really been exposed to what I could do in the outdoors, or what does conservation actually look like. And so I did have GIS, Geographic Information Systems skills. And so I snagged an opportunity with the Student Conservation Association as an intern for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And so I spent the first 2 years of my conservation journey managing whooping crane wildlife data. So shout out to all my data nerds out there. And I loved it. I absolutely loved working with the bird data and learning more about the science, but I was intrigued by the lack of communication between the science community and the public. And that's where I really found my first niche. And so I began to do a lot more education and get outside. And because I was in the regional office, I was able to get out and do more field work. And so my first 2 years, I really spent kind of getting my hands dirty and feeling what conservation felt like, and doing surveys and just doing all the cool stuff from conservation. And so as I grew as an educator, and oh yeah, sorry, I was the picture. This is from a field trip. It was a the Dragonfly Festival at Bitter Lake National Wildlife Refuge in Roswell. And so this was when I was really getting to live the best of both worlds as an educator and someone who loves to work with kids, but also getting to show them how to gently hold and touch and release a quail at this time. And so, yeah, so as I evolved, I realized that I did have more of people skills, and I wanted to talk and share my experiences. And I moved into coalition building and community engagement. And so that's kind of where I landed afterwards. And I spent the past 2 years in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And the things that I loved about it, and also the things that I kind of felt exhausted by.
Let's see. Maybe it's my computer, but can you try one more time?
With the last part?
Okay, it might be me. You can go ahead and continue.
Oh, okay. Well, you said you can't hear me though?
We can hear you now. You cut out for a brief moment, so if you did want to repeat that last part, that would be great, Leandra.
Okay, sorry. So I think my internet is kind of doing its own thing, but I appreciate your patience. And so I was saying that I recently relocated back to Texas to regather, realign, and find myself and find my voice again, and to truly realign what I feel like is my purpose in the outdoors. And so I've been spending some time reflecting on some of my favorite adventures, but also some of the things that I kind of felt exhausted by within this field. I'm gonna look over here, but the picture that we're looking at right now, this was one of my first snail surveys in Albuquerque. Actually, it was at Bitter Lake National Wildlife Refuge, and it was an indigenous spring snail that only was endemic to the areas, to the sinkholes at Bitter Lake Wildlife Refuge. So I was digging into this muck to try to get these snails that we were going to manually count.
Okay, guys, this is wild. I don't understand why I can't hear anything. I'm gonna do this. Leandra, I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna log back in if that's okay.
Okay.
That way, we'll see if it will work, because it's not working at all.
Well, in the meantime, in between time, guys, I am actually working on a black mermaid, which I felt was appropriate for our ocean theme. So thank you guys for having me here. I think we're gonna do purple. Yeah, so like Danny said, we met in 2016 when I was nominated for the NAAE 30 Under 30, which for me was a very exciting moment to be recognized for my contributions and what I was working on in Albuquerque. And it was really exciting to not only meet Danny, but other people of color from across the world that were doing so many great projects. And so I'm definitely grateful to have met her and made that connection. And, 3 years later, here we are reunited, and it feels so good. Sorry, we're trying to figure out what our technical difficulty is. I'm gonna keep painting though.
All right, I am back. Hello.
Testing.
Here we go. I can hear you.
Yay! Okay, good. Okay, I was running out of filler stuff, and I was like, well, Danny and I met back in the day, and
In the day. Was it 2 or 3 years ago?
it was 3. I think it was 3.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So I'm not really sure what I missed the entire end of that. I couldn't hear anything. So if you're done, if you want me to move on.
Yeah, so I just briefly shared my story. I think I shared a good amount, and I'm excited to hear your story, and then we're going to move to our next question so we don't run out of time.
Fantastic. Okay. And shout out to Youth-A-Thon, shout out to the Ocean Project. Thank you guys for having us here today. This is really quite special. And also wanted to give a huge thank you to
Bailey and Laura, because I know they both worked very hard to make sure this happened. Let's see, the last thing on the back end, I need permission from the admin to allow me to share my screen once again. It's telling me it's disabled. Let's see, fantastic, thank you. All right, so here we go. Let's jump right back into it again. I'm gonna hit play. Okay. So yes, so once again, my name is Danni Washington, and I've been working in the ocean conservation space my entire adult career. When I was 21 years old, I graduated from the University of Miami with a degree in marine science and biology. But I knew at that point that I was destined for something different than a traditional research career, which is what I thought I was originally going to do when I graduated. But what I realized in college is that I needed to fill a gap, a major communication gap, where I met so many young people in my community in Miami that had no idea, you know, what was underneath the surface of the water that was literally miles away from their home, or they didn't understand the different struggles and challenges that the ocean was facing and has been facing for a long time. So I wanted to help communicate that information. And so at 21, I started a nonprofit called Big Blue and You, and we hosted for 7 years straight an amazing festival called Art by the Sea. And it was a day to celebrate the ocean, to celebrate what we have and what we should be grateful for, and also to introduce young people to the wonders of the ocean through science and art. So we would essentially invite artists out to create hands-on art projects about ocean conservation themes in tandem and side by side with local scientists who would explain really complex things in a very simple and engaging way. And this day, like, it's one of my favorite days. I wish we could host it this year, but of course we had to postpone because of COVID-19. But it's a tremendous day. And this picture that you're looking at right now is a group of students, college students, high school students, middle school students who held out flags for our opening ceremony right there at Bear Cut Preserve, which is this, it's basically a water barrier between two islands. One's called Virginia Key, the other one's called Key Biscayne. And then on the left side is the Atlantic Ocean and the right side is Biscayne Bay. So like I mentioned, we would invite scientists to come out and set up their gear. So we had plenty of scientists, microscopes and different tanks and all kinds of fun stuff to look at and understand. And I believe this young lady right here is looking at some plankton under a microscope, which we all know is a very essential part of the ocean. And this is Mimi Foray. She's an artist, a pretty well-known artist in Miami, and an art teacher as well. And so she's been at every single Artsy each year. And it's just a fun way to talk about the ocean, because I've been to so many different ocean conservation events that tend to have the same type of narrative where it's negative, it's almost about like everything that we're doing wrong, and it's guilt driven. Art by the Sea is not that. Art by the Sea is meant for inspiration, to have fun, to enjoy, and to, you know, encourage people to love the ocean, because we all know if we love the ocean, we will protect it. So on the flip side, while that was happening, Big Blue and You was starting to grow, and I also joined a team that same year in 2008 called Untamed Science, and we started making videos for textbooks. And some of you watching today may have even seen some of these videos because we started in 2008 and we didn't finish up until about 2011. And these videos went out to schools nationwide in K-12 science books. It was an awesome experience. And then a couple years later, started working with the Ocean Project and Youth Ocean Conservation Summit to create this new initiative called Sea Youth Rise Up, which is now no longer new. I mean, it's 4 years old at this point, but it was such a blast. You might recognize in the middle there, Bailey Ritter with the Ocean Project. She was a part of our first delegation, and we've got lots of amazing young people, young leaders who are doing great things in the community. Sean Russell is also there on the left-hand side, the founder of Youth Ocean Conservation Summit. So after starting Big Blue and You, working with Untamed Science for a few years, I finally landed a nationally syndicated show called Nature Knows Best, which is all about biomimicry, looking at how we're using nature to inspire our future and current designs and innovating new ideas on how to solve some of our biggest challenges as humans. And I love this show because I got to speak to engineers, biologists, chemists, inventors, all of the most brilliant minds out there, and pick their brains about the cool things that they were creating based on nature's principles. And I truly believe for all of us who are concerned about the environment, who know that the climate crisis is the most important crisis that we must tackle right now, I think the field of biomimicry is truly the tip of the arrow when it comes to figuring out what's next. I truly believe we will innovate our way out of this crisis, but we have to be very diligent. We have to act quickly. But if you think about the way that nature works, you know, this planet has had billions of years to do research and development. So many of the systems and the individual organisms on this planet are so perfect because they've evolved in a way that allows them to thrive on the planet. And now it's our turn. As humans, we have to figure this out. And I think the first step is always being humble and observing nature. And that's why this show meant so much to me. It was syndicated on Fox, and we explored so many cool ideas. Also worked on a show called Science the Ish Out of It. It's currently on Facebook Watch, and it was a lot of fun. It was geared toward an older audience of millennials, and we did about 10 different episodes, we being Christina Hutchinson and I, she's actually a comedian, and we paired up and we explained different concepts, simple questions that people asked online about life, and we helped explain the answers using the scientific method. And then speed up to today, I've been working on this show called Mission Unstoppable on CBS. I'm a correspondent. It's hosted by Miranda Cosgrove. Some of you might recognize her from Disney, iCarly. Yep, that's her. So now she's hosting the show, and I love this show because it's all about women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And it's been an incredible experience over the last year filming these episodes because we're now showcasing the journey for women in these fields and how it's opening the doors for anyone to be a part of STEM. And I think the bottom line is for us to evolve as human beings, not only do we have to look at nature for inspiration, but we also need to think like scientists. We have to be able to ask questions, good questions, research the answer, make objective decisions, and collaborate with each other. So if we all had that mentality like a scientist, I think we would be at a vastly different place than we are right now. So if you are in a STEM field, if you're studying in a STEM field, stick with it. We need you, we need you, we need you. I can't really encourage that more. But I also want to make sure that these fields are diverse. And that's really the main heart of our conversation today, is how do we increase diversity within the ocean conservation space, as well as just the general conservation space. All right, sweet. So here we go. One of the terms that kind of bubbled up in the last few weeks in light of everything that's happened with the death of George Floyd, as well as Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, and so many more Black Americans, it's really been hard to kind of put a word or a phrase or a concept to all that's going on. The closest thing that I could find that really inspired me, even through my mourning and the way that, you know, these past few weeks have been so difficult to deal with as a person of color. This term that Leah Thomas, she's a young activist, she created this, and she coined this term, intersectional environmentalism. This is a very important term because it's talking about inclusivity and advocating for the protection of the planet and people at the same time. And it also identifies the injustices that are happening to marginalized communities and showing that all of this is interconnected. Because I'm 33 years old, and when I began working in conservation, this conversation was not happening. This felt separate. The struggles of frontline communities, First Nations communities, all of this was not involved in this conversation. But I think the climate justice movement has brought all of this to light, and it's bubbled up to the surface. And now we see this intersection that cannot be denied. So Leandra, tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on this concept.
Well, I definitely think that to not acknowledge the role that race plays and has played in the outdoors, I think from the founding, not only of the country, but the way that environmentalism was established, it was very separate. And so I think it's really exciting to finally be getting to a place where we are having these larger conversations and we are having to confront the things that make us uncomfortable. But it's like, if we want change, if we want to see an outdoors that is representative not only of the US, but of the world, like the outdoors should be representative of the people that I don't know, that live there. Yeah, so I think it's really important to not try to compartmentalize not only the race and outdoors, but definitely like socioeconomic impacts and definitely historic traumas and things that have played a role and that we have to acknowledge and work towards when we're talking about moving toward a more inclusive and just outdoor space.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we've dealt with so many different things as conservationists in this field, and I know today we wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about some of those past experiences. Some would call them microaggressions, but I would say these are little tidbits, these are little stories that both Leandra and I have experienced out in the field, working with researchers, other conservationists, and it's something that needs to be acknowledged, because many times I felt like in the past, these stories were almost not valid in the eyes of others. It was almost like, oh no, this is a figment of your imagination, this can't be happening, there's no way. And that's just simply not true. It's a part of our experience, it's a part of what we observed as individuals. And I think it's really important that we have a discussion about it so that those who are watching today, you can have a better understanding of where we're coming from.
Yeah.
So Leandra, give me a couple of examples, or one example if you can, regarding maybe a certain instance where you felt microaggressions were pointed toward you.
Well, I was thinking, you know what's crazy? I was thinking about this last night, and I feel like as people of color, I know as a Black woman, that I have been put in these types of situations so often that I don't even think it's fair to say, like, I have to search through which example I think is the most palatable, which I think is, you know, people are going to not necessarily feel shamed about. And I just wanted to acknowledge that that is a burden that people of color carry. We have to be the learning moment, the teaching moment, and that's exhausting. So a couple years back, I was invited to speak at a national conference. It was about wildlife and some other related things. And I talked about the work I was doing in Albuquerque, coalition building and partnership building and all of those things. And I was invited to another smaller lunch, and it was more of the, you know, higher ups. This was, when I think of like being invited to like a seat at the table, this is one of those tables that I was like, oh, I clearly have a seat here. I want to use this moment to really, to leverage my voice, not only as a woman of color, but as a young person in this field that feels like these opportunities are not as attainable as they should be. So I definitely was, you know, expressing my feelings of how are you bringing in young people of color? It almost feels like it's just a show because you're not actually putting your money where it should be. You should be inviting us as young people to come be a part of this conference, to share, to listen. We're not only, as young people, we shouldn't only be taught, we can be teaching and sharing our work and our experiences. And this was a full circle moment because someone that I had met when I first started in conservation was in that same room, and it was a Black man, and he was one of the first people that I saw in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that was in a leadership position, and it was very inspiring for me. So to sit in this same room and to advocate for young people of color, I felt very powerful and seen and heard. And so afterwards, I'm having a conversation with him, and we're catching up. It's been a couple years, and wow, you know, you've gone to all these places and it's cool. And a white woman walks up to us and you know, excuse me, I just wanted to tell you how articulate you were. And to me, that's a microaggression because it shouldn't be surprising that I'm articulate and that I'm well-spoken. I am college educated. To me, it felt like, why do you feel like articulate is a compliment? Like I'm coming here to share and to be a part of the experience. And it kind of knocked me down a couple notches. It made me feel like, I don't know, like I was there to mine information or to kind of get, you know, I feel like the question is, well, how do we change the face of the outdoors? And then we give you the response and it's like, well, I don't necessarily want to give up my chair though. So in return, I'm going to tell you, you know, you're articulate and thank you. But I definitely felt, I felt a little shaded by that. And when she walked away, we had that conversation that was just like, you know, don't be discouraged. This isn't always and forever. And this is why it's important to be in these spaces and to be asking for changes to be made and for people to educate themselves and to continue to do the work, to commit to making those mistakes and saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I'm willing to do the work to be a better ally and supporter for you. So that was just one example of a time I had been flown out specifically to speak. And then I was called articulate when I got there. And I don't know. I just feel like that's something you would say to a toddler, but that's just me personally.
It just didn't feel right at the time, right? Like
Yeah.
you wanted to be acknowledged for the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
Not that your language is, you know, more than someone would expect because.
Yeah, and it just felt like that's all you got out of that. You know, all these things I shared, all the things I talked about today, and you told me I said it well. I mean, I thank you, but I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. And that's, I mean, that's a really good example. I think a lot of times when people are in a group of, you know, just with others, you just want to be seen for who you are and for what you're contributing to whatever that space is, and that you're not going to be just put to the side or, you know, kind of just used as a token. That's happened to me so many different times where I'm the only one in the room, and all I desire is just to see a beautiful rainbow of people in this space, because we are the Earth warriors, and we need to look like the human race, which is very diverse, very, you know, different. And if we can make just more of a conscious effort to make sure that that happens going forward, I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do within this field. And it's all about inclusion. But before we get into inclusion, I'll tell a quick story about something that happened to me back when I was in college, and it stuck with me till this day. So this was over 12 years ago that it happened. And I've only told this story a couple of times. And it hasn't been until the last year or so that it really resurfaced for me. And so essentially I was in the Galapagos Islands. I went down there for a field course in my last year of college, and it was a big deal. I mean, I did not have the money to pay for that extra fee that came along with the course, but my community, one of my mom's friends, heard about the idea that I wanted to go. And I was like, I have no idea where I'm gonna get this extra $3,000 from to be able to, you know, take this class. And she heard that, and then she's like, no, you're gonna go, you're going. And so she claimed that for me. And then she proceeded over the course of about 3 weeks. She raised all of that money for me from different groups of people. I even had like a team from a hospital, a group of nurses who donated to me just to see me fulfill this dream of being able to go down there and experience this field course and dive deeper into marine biology. So long story short, I get down there. It was a 3-week course. So we were there for a minute. There were lots of people that were, you know, we all were very different. We had about, I think I want to say around 16 students, somewhere around there. And there was one particular student, a white cis male, who I didn't really get particularly close to throughout the course. You know how that happens. When you're on a group trip, you end up bonding with certain people, and it just happens naturally. But one of the last, like probably second to last week, our group split into two. One group went out in the field and the other stayed back, and then we switched the next day. The day that I went out to the field, this particular guy, he happened to be staying back. And I brought something with me on that trip. I brought like a little teddy bear that my mom had given me when I was 13. It was something that I wanted to take with me when I travel, because it's just one of those things that you know, it's comforting. So I brought it with me. The day that I got back from the field portion of that day, I walked into my room and I saw my teddy bear hanging from a noose in my closet. So when I saw that, I couldn't believe it. I was speechless, because not only was I the only woman of color, Black woman on this trip, but it was like, where did he find this rope? And what inspired him to make a noose to hang my little, you know, my little teddy and leave it for me to find when I got back? It made no sense to me. I was furious. I had to sit there for about 20 minutes to really absorb what had just happened. And for him to not think that the symbolism of that noose, what it meant, it was like the depths of my soul were on fire. And we ended up having a group conversation, and he apologized a lot, but it made me think, why would you be inspired to do that out of the blue? Like, out of the blue. It was so random. But again, that story has stuck with me ever since.
Yeah. It's hard to not feel like it was intentional when, you know, you made it a point to go get some rope and do this whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So it was pretty traumatic. And now that we're seeing this upsurgence of people hanging from trees, like it's a really scary notion, and that it has to go away. It has to go away. We cannot continue to allow this type of behavior. And that, I think also the noose hanging from a tree is also speaking to our community's connection to nature. There have been a lot of traumatic events that have happened in nature for Black people in America, whether it's in the water or if it's out in the woods. There are a lot of things that we have to heal from. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe that nature is healing. I know that the more time we spend outside, the more that we'll be able to get over these traumas, but we need help. We need facilitators. We need allies to stand by us and to know that this is a process that we all have to go through. And until everyone is included outside, there will be no conservation. Things will not move forward. We won't be able to protect what we want to protect unless everyone is involved.
Yeah, and I think it's equally important to acknowledge the starting point of conservation and the founding fathers and some of the language and the ideologies that they brought with them about land and people of color, and discovering land that was, you know, already occupied by indigenous peoples in itself is already problematic. And so I think when we talk about how nature has been weaponized, especially against the Black community and healing those relationships, I've always found I guess solace in knowing that our ancestors, this is not how we traditionally connected to the land before we were enslaved. And we did have a good connection to the land, and laying our burdens by the river and doing things that are healing in nature. It has always been, outside of when it was used as a weapon, has been a healing space for Black people. And I want to continue to encourage Black people to get outside and to find those spaces, and to just be another face. And sometimes I find myself kind of lost in a sea of white faces, but I remind myself, to another brown face, I'm gonna be that one next person that they get to see and get to nod at and get to realize, like, you're not in it by yourself. And knowing that surrounding yourself with a good support system and allies, like, you can't go wrong. We can only move forward. We're not going backwards. That's not how time works. So
not an option.
Not an option.
Right, exactly. And, you know, and I think right now is so important at this juncture, because we've now seen, you know, a few weeks or a couple of weeks of protests where the whole world has been galvanized and is rising up to speak up for Black lives. And I think it's one of the most powerful things I've ever seen in my life. As tough as these times are, I think that it's an amazing time to be alive, because we're seeing a shift in consciousness where people are waking up to the struggles of their fellow human beings and waking up to the idea of really doing something to help and to fix it, and no longer burying it under the rug. This is a deep wound in America that has been festering for a long time. And every time somebody tried to lift the bandage, it was like, oh, no, cover back up. We're just not that's gonna heal on its own. It's like, no, we need everybody involved. So on that note, Leandra, tell me about something that was a catalyst for triumph. How have you been able to overcome some of these microaggressions and moments where you felt like, like this doesn't feel like the right space for me? When was that moment that you felt confirmation?
My moment that I felt like, aha, conservation is where I need to stay. It actually happened in 2016. It was after the election. And I was pretty bummed out and not really feeling hopeful. And I thought to myself, I spent some time thinking whether or not conservation or being in the outdoors was the best contribution towards the Black community. Is this the best use of my skills to be ensuring our livelihood and just that we matter, you know, like for our fight. And so I went on this hike with a friend, and we went to this wilderness area in New Mexico, and wilderness, of course, there aren't any motorized vehicles or paths. And so you're just in this beautiful landscape. And so it was basically just like recess outside. And we spent this day hiking and just exploring, smelling the trees and, you know, just doing weird things and like being nature freaks all day. And so at the end of the day, we hiked up to the top of, it was a mesa that was out there. And so we're sitting out there and kind of reflecting and sharing, and my friend fell asleep, and I had this moment just before sunset to myself to sit and think and cry and kind of let out some of that pain and frustration of feeling like, why is this, like what am I supposed to be doing? What is my purpose? What is my contribution? What does that look like for me? And as the sun is setting, it just was like the biggest moon was coming up over the horizon. And the moon has always been like my good luck charm. When my parents would deploy, I would talk to the moon and just feel like they were there for me. So for this moment, the moon to come over, and when I got home, I realized it was a super moon. I didn't even know it was supposed to be a super moon that night. And so it's like the biggest, brightest moon. And when we hiked down, we hiked only by the super moonlight. We decided to keep our headlamps off. And I felt this kind of, I don't know, just like rewilding of myself. I could feel myself trusting my eyes, just trusting myself and enjoying the outdoor space. I felt so one with nature, but also the scale of it, being outside in a large space, put into perspective, like I am one person, but I can make a difference. And I love the outdoors. I enjoyed that day so much. When we were almost to the car, I was like, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what I'm supposed to be sharing. I'm supposed to be sharing the outdoors with Black people, with people who love Black people in the outdoors. Anybody that supports it, anybody that wants to come can come. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I don't know, I felt alive again. I felt like this supermoon was speaking to me, and nature being in the soils and feeling it and experiencing it, it breathed new life into me, and I hit the ground running ever since. And it was the catalyst for a lot of really cool opportunities and just tenacity and not giving up and not being turned away by those frustrations or those ears that aren't quite ready to listen to my words. I'm here, I'm gonna say it again. I'll come back, I'm gonna do it again, and then I'm gonna do it again, And so it's really exciting. I'm getting pumped up just thinking about it right now, because I've been silent for a couple years, and this is my first time kind of being back and sharing my words. And I'm grateful, Danni. I'm grateful for you guys for this space, and thank you. Wow. I just got, just how much I love the outdoors and sharing this space and the ocean and just the planet. I think that's the beauty of the world. It's just like nature. You can't not see a good thing,
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Thank you for sharing the space. I mean, it's so important that we share these stories, because the more that we share them, the more that we can relate to one another and know that there's somebody across on the other side of the world that may be having the same exact experience as you, and to create this network of this generation that will be the wave of change. I think it's so essential. The other day I was listening to one of my favorite people in ocean conservation. His name is Captain Paul Watson, and he's like a living pirate. Like, he's literally like a pirate. He's the founder of the Sea Shepherd Society, and what they do is they help enforce laws out in the open ocean, where many governments have not been willing to help enforce fishing laws, illegal fishing and all that stuff. His fleet of ships and his volunteer crew do just that. They look out for the ocean. And he was describing this concept that I hadn't really adopted yet, but it was about the fact that we are all currently in the ocean, no matter where we are, because what are we doing? We're breathing. We are breathing in oxygen produced by the ocean. And it was just this idea that the physical water space of the ocean is just the receptacle, but the ocean is all around us all the time, in the clouds, in the rain, in the rivers, in the air, everywhere. And I just loved it so much, because it reminded me of what my catalyst moment was and has been for a long time. My ocean encounters have always been very special, with a lot of big animals, everything from whale sharks to bull sharks to giant manta rays. But I think one of my favorite moments in the ocean, honestly, was being in Mexico and being out by myself in 5 miles offshore. I had been dropped off by a boat because we were swimming with whale sharks at the time. And they dropped me off, and I didn't have a buddy, which I should have, but I'm grateful for the moment that I did have, because it was the most serene feeling that I've ever felt. All I could see were the sun rays piercing through the water down to the endless bottom, because I could not see the bottom where it was that deep. And then as I had that moment, I remember being in basking in that sun and just loving how the simplicity and how gorgeous the ocean is on its own. And then when I looked up, I saw a whale shark that was basically portraying this behavior called going vertical. So normally they have to swim constantly, you know, to keep water moving over their gills. But sometimes whale sharks will stop. If there's a lot of plankton in the water, they'll stop and they'll put their body vertical to the surface and they'll just gulp water as they eat. It's almost like they're just
vacuum, just like
they're a vacuum, but not moving its caudal fin whatsoever. And so I saw the whale shark doing that and I swam up to it myself. And the whale shark didn't move. It was still, you know, doing its thing. It was like, oh, hey, what's up? But I swam up right next to this whale shark. And we had this moment where I was just like, I couldn't believe it. And oh God.
Oh my gosh, I'm getting chills. That's so exciting.
It was really exciting. And it's kept me focused ever since. But again, there have been many moments like that where there's no price tag you could put on that. And my hope is that as many people as possible can experience something similar, because then they'll understand their true connection to the ocean and that it's a part of all of us. So anywho.
I mean, wow, I'm like, whew. Sheesh. I mean, if that's not on everybody's list right now, I don't know what is. I want to I want to do all that. That was good.
I mean, with the biggest fish in the ocean, not the biggest animal. You know what the biggest animal in the ocean is, right?
It's a whale.
Yep. And it's the color of the ocean.
Blue whales. Yeah. See, I didn't even have any hints. That was great. I didn't need it. And I keep forgetting to paint, but I'm gonna keep working on this. And so afterwards, I'll link my info if anyone is wondering how this comes out, because I keep forgetting to be painting.
Yes, and I'm so excited because it's a mermaid.
Uh-huh.
For those of you who know me, you know that I identify as the mocha mermaid. That is all me.
Inspired by you.
I love it. So we've got a couple more minutes and I've got a couple more slides. One of the things that we wanted to offer today, besides just opening the door for this conversation, is we wanted to give some tools and some things that are specific to the ocean conservation movement, that for those of you who don't identify as Black or a person of color, perhaps you can consider reading these books, because it'll help empower you as a true ally in this space to make sure that your counterparts and your peers who are Black, who are people of color, who are Indigenous, making sure that they are involved. And you know, it's what I'm most happy about is the fact that this new generation is so aware. And I really don't feel like there's too much explaining that needs to be done. It's really the older generations that we really have to educate. But again, there's no harm in learning a little bit more, because we are infinite in our capacity to learn. And that's the beauty of being human. So here we go. I'm gonna put this up, and if you wanna take a screenshot, that's totally cool. So you can remember it. But this is just a quick book list that Leandra put together that is very helpful for you to check out. So let me move this chat box here. Man, me and technology today, we're just not getting along.
Well, you know what? Mercury is in retrograde, and I don't want to be that person, but I did want to throw that out there. So
no, did it just? Here we go. I was asking if Mercury in retrograde just started.
I think it did like a couple days ago. It was in the past like day or two, I think.
Oh snap! Okay. if you abide by some of the astrology.
Yeah. If you into
it. Okay, so here's the quick list. Leandra, can you give us like a snapshot of why you think each of these are valuable books?
Yeah, so these are some of my favorite books and voices and faces in the outdoors. And I think they all do a really good job of not only speaking to their individual experiences as Black people in the outdoors, but also sharing the larger picture, I guess, in terms of like where we would love to see conservation moving, or the face of the outdoors moving to, but also some of the people in our history that have inspired those moments, like the Buffalo Soldiers, and some of those inspiring, sorry, I was trying to look and see which books we had on there. The Adventure Gap is another just great resource. I think it's the first all Black American team, all African American team to try to summit the Denali Peak, which is the highest peak in the US. And so Yeah, I think these are some of my go-to books when I think about connecting people of color to the outdoors and where to start, or just getting a feel for what it is like to be a person of color in the outdoors, and just reading more and feeling more of that process.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, these are all really great choices. And yeah, I think that's one of the blessings of living through COVID-19 right now, is that a lot of us have been given so much extra time. Although we're trapped, like if we're in quarantine, we're inside, but at least we've got this extra time to read. And that's something that for me over the last few years has been so difficult to do, because my schedule has been super fast paced and moving so quickly. And I love reading, and I want to go back to this practice because it's so essential. Cool.
For sure.
What about movies? I didn't make a slide for the movies, but there were 2 recommendations. I mean, I think the board 13th is a must see. It's on Netflix.
What was the second one? I feel like you said the second one too.
The second one is I Am Not Your Negro. It's on Amazon, but it's a film featuring James Baldwin, the acclaimed poet, who's incredible, and his words have resonated since forever. I mean, since when he was here, and now that he's no longer here with us physically, his words have stuck around. And he was just such a powerful voice during the civil rights movement. And I just loved his creativity. He lived in Paris for a while. He had just had enough with a lot of the hardships that African Americans faced in this country, and just decided he was like, I gotta go somewhere else. And then he eventually came back and did support everything that was happening with civil rights.
Yeah, I think for movies, for any sort of literature or resource, I think definitely don't limit yourself to where we've started. These are just some of my favorites that I thought of and wanted to share, but I know there are definitely resource and book lists that are circulating through our great internet right now that I would say definitely take the time to read some of those resources and look at those videos and share and listen to people who are already sharing, listen to the voices that are already out there, and asking yourself, how can I amplify the voices that need to be heard right now? And I think an example that I can think of off the top of my head is at the protests. You know, if you were there as an ally and you had a microphone, am I the person who should be speaking right now, or is there someone else that I should give this mic to talk? And I think in conservation that translates the same way, where we have different topics and panels or spaces, and you as an ally or as a person might realize that someone else is better fitted for that space and to be able to share their experience, especially if your experience has already been shared and you're not necessarily feeling alone. And I think sometimes it's hard to kind of capture how much representation matters, but it does. And so definitely challenging yourself to pass the mic and to know when someone else should be talking.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a great piece of advice for those who consider themselves true allies, for them to take into consideration. And I think I would add on to that just to say, to extend on what you mentioned about amplifying, you know, other voices. There are so many ways that you can do that, not only in a conference or a summit space, like it's about online, it's about social media. I personally, all kinds. I mean, there are just so many opportunities for you to uplift your Black, Brown, Indigenous brothers and sisters in so many different instances. So I say take advantage of that moment and do it in an authentic way. Not where you're co-opting or bringing, trying to do it just for the sake of time and the moment that we're living in, but are you truly here for the movement? Because I'm telling you, a rising tide lifts all ships. And if we all focus our energy now as ocean conservationists and as people who just care about the planet, we have to lift each other up no matter what. Yeah. So with that, I wanted to end today's session with our last, couple seconds. Here we go. So it's a little bit pixelated, I apologize for that, but this is a snapshot of the pledge that Leah Thomas, who coined the term intersectional environmentalist, for all those who support this to take. So if you're watching right now and you want to take this pledge with us, feel free, but I'll go ahead and just read it through, and then we are wrapping up this session. So here we go. I will stand in solidarity with Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities and the planet. I will not ignore the intersections of environmentalism and social justice. I will use my privilege to advocate for Black and brown lives in spaces where this message is often silenced. I will proactively do the work to learn about the environmental and social injustices Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities without minimizing it. I will respect the boundaries of BIPOC, the acronym for that, friends and activists, and not demand they perform emotional labor or do the work for me. I will share my learnings with other environmentalists in my community. I will amplify the messages of Black, Indigenous, POC activists and environmental leaders. I will not remain silent during pivotal political and cultural moments that impact BIPOC communities. So there you have it, the Intersectional Environmentalist Pledge. You can find this on Instagram. Make sure you follow Green Girl Leah. She's so awesome and a wealth of information. So with that, I want to say thank you for having us today. What's up, Andrew?
That was so amazing. If you do have a couple more minutes, there's one question in the chat that I wanted to run by you all. Someone asked, as a young BIPOC, how do you balance accepting opportunities for experience and needing to be paid, especially when you're in a space where you're constantly having to be teaching others, particularly when those others are white and privileged?
Oh my goodness, that's a great question.
That is
Leandra, you want to take a snap at it?
Yeah, because my first 4 years, I definitely was that person that was just ambitious and not necessarily not saying no, but I was pretty much open to anything, and I wanted to gather and soak in any experience that I could get. But I started realizing as my skills were building, I don't know if my paycheck is matching my skill set now. And so I had to kind of reevaluate and have some of those tougher conversations about, well, what does funding look like? And how do I make sure that I'm being paid properly? Even just at speaking engagements or at conferences, making sure that if there are other people or other presenters that are being paid, that you are also being paid for your time and for your words. And I definitely think I had to check in terms of the emotional toll that it was taking on me. So I was okay with not necessarily making the most money because I was gaining experience. But once I felt like it was taking too much of my emotional health, then it was no longer something that was benefiting me in a way that I saw fit. And so that was actually what inspired me to move back home and kind of reassess. I love that I used the word inspire because I was not excited to move home, but I did move home. And that was some of the reason why. It was because, I got to advocate for myself and make sure that I'm being paid properly for the things that I bring to the table.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, the same for me. The first 10 years of working in conservation, from 21 to 31, I can honestly tell you right now that I really did not get compensated in the way that I should have been in retrospect. And what has helped me get through that is building a team. So what I would recommend as a young person, if you are truly interested in moving into these spaces to accept speaking opportunities and, just time to connect with people and then also share your experience, which Leandra said is very emotionally taxing, is very true. But what you're bringing to the table is a vibe. You're bringing the energy, and that is extremely valuable. Don't let anyone tell you that it's just a couple hours of your time. No, we're talking about the time that you take off of the other work that you're doing. We're talking about the time it takes for you to travel to an event, to get situated, to create a presentation, to make sure you're on, you know what I mean? Like there is so much more to just coming to a conference and giving a talk. It's your time and it's your energy. So make sure you value it. You can build your way up, but definitely start asking and presenting yourself in a way that you need to be compensated. I know it's a difficult thing because a lot of us want to do things that are, giving back into it's part of our nature as people love the environment.
Pay those bills. It does not pay those bills. I definitely would agree with you. Community is so important. And for me, that is the most invaluable thing that I have achieved in my conservation career is some of the friends and family that I've made that paycheck could never give me. So just taking, those opportunities as they come, but relationships and community, like you said, Danny, yes.
Mm-hmm. And just take an inventory for yourself. Make a bullet list of all the things that you bring to the table. It's a little bit more than just a resume. It's more about like, what are these nuanced things that make you completely different from anyone else in the space, and that how you can positively contribute to whatever event you're going to go to.
Finding your niche.
That's it.
I love all this advice, and you know, I have had so many similar experiences to what you all described. We don't even have enough time to get into.
Yeah. We'll have to do a second round on this.
I really, really appreciate you all taking the time. It was such a thoughtful presentation. I can't wait to see what this mermaid looks like once it's done.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
Along with that, but just thank you for taking the time on a Saturday, and I think folks really appreciated this presentation. So, and I think you have a lot of really big fans watching as well. So.
I see some names that I, of course, adore. Bailey's there. Akila, what's up, girl? Hey, Laura. Yeah, I see. I love it. I love it. Thank you all for the support, and thank you for giving us and sharing the space with us. Leandra, I love you.
Yes, I love you too. Thank you for having me, guys. This is amazing.
All right, cool. Well, I'm gonna get on with my Saturday.
Me too. Go hydrate. Water is life.
Yes. Good luck with the rest of the sessions, Andrew. You're doing an amazing job.
Yes. Thank you, Andrew.
So much, both of you. I hope to be connected with you all sometime soon. But in the meantime, get on with your Saturday.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye.
Much love. Bye, guys.
Wow. So we're gonna start the next session here in probably just 2 minutes, but I just need to take a second after that session to reflect. There's so many just nuggets of information that I just feel compelled to underscore. You know, when Danni was talking about this moment of confusion as she encountered a microaggression. I can't tell you how many times I've been in that moment and how many times I've heard that sentiment reflected by people of color. We are both inundated with microaggressions, but then also surprised when they occur. And then, you know, to Leandra's point around having to say things multiple times in order to be heard for the substance of what you're saying rather than the way in which you're saying it or your ability to speak like white people. You know, it's just something that so many of us encounter every day. But, you know, I do just want to also echo, it's weird, you know, we're in a global pandemic and there's a Black Lives Matter uprising happening right now, but I do feel more hopeful, strangely, than I have in a long time. And I think it's just because I feel consciousness shifting around me. And there's something about that really makes me inspired for the future. And the last thing I'll say before we move on to the next session, you know, we heard earlier from Nia about environmental racism. And, you know, in part of the clip that she played, it talked about the EPA's Civil Rights Department and how they had never found a case of, or had never found someone responsible for a case of environmental racism. You know, there's a direct line that we can draw between the lack of diversity in the conservation space and the perpetuation of environmental racism in this country. And these things are inextricably linked. And so when we talk about diversifying the space, it's not just because we want to, you know, have more Black faces in the room, but I think, you know, we definitely do. It's that we cannot achieve environmental justice unless people who are routinely marginalized by the status quo have a seat at the table and are able to take that power back themselves. So, you know, we need to see an EPA that works for us, and there's so many other examples.